I watch 700 people die a little more every night, and most mornings I feel nothing at all. That probably makes me sound like a monster, but the truth is simpler and more boring than that. I am a pylon keeper, which means I sit in a control room 60 meters underground and monitor the biometric output of inmates serving terminal sentences. The West Pylon is both a maximum security prison and a power generation facility. The convicted are suspended in containment vats, where their neural and metabolic activity is converted into usable electricity for the city above. The process is slow, measured in months or years depending on the severity of the crime, and my job is to ensure it proceeds without interruption. I keep the numbers stable and file reports when they are not. My name is Daniel Shaw, and I have been doing this work for 7 years. Before that, I was a municipal logistics manager, which is a polite way of saying I tracked shipping containers and argued about delivery schedules. I had a wife named Celia and a daughter named Maya, and on a Tuesday afternoon while I was 15 minutes late leaving the office because of a trivial dispute over a manifest error, a radical separatist group called the Sovereign Hand detonated a plasma charge in the Meridian Market. Celia and Maya were shopping for dinner. The official casualty count was 83. I have never been able to think of it as 83. For me, it has always been 2. The system, that is what we call the governing administrative framework that manages everything from water distribution to criminal sentencing, gave me a way to make sense of what happened. It showed me the names of the men who built the device, the woman who transported it, the financiers who funded the cell. It showed me their trials, their convictions, their sentencing to facilities, exactly like this one. It gave me an enemy I could see and a justice I could believe in. When I applied to become a keeper, I did not do it for the salary or the benefits. I did it because I needed to know that the people who destroyed my life would never have the chance to destroy anyone else's. That is why I feel nothing when I watch the numbers decline. These are not people in the vats. They are calculations. They are the physical consequence of their own choices, converted into something useful for the first time in their miserable lives. It is 3 in the morning and my shift began 2 hours ago. The control center is a circular room on the second level of the facility, lined with monitors that display real-time data from all 6 operational blocks. Each block holds approximately 120 vats, arranged in rows across an entire level. The data I see is clean and simple: inmate designation numbers, current power output measured in kilowatts, and a green status indicator if their biological functions are within acceptable parameters. If the indicator turns yellow, I log it. If it turns red, I call engineering. If it goes dark, I file a termination report and someone from maintenance drains the vat and loads the remains into the incinerator on level 9. I have filed 62 termination reports in 7 years. I remember every single number. The console in front of me is organized exactly the way I need it to be. My data slate sits parallel to the edge of the desk, aligned with the bottom of the primary monitor. My stylus rests in its designated slot. My access card is clipped to my uniform collar, not hanging loose where it might snag on equipment. I perform a systems diagnostic at the start of every shift, even though the previous keeper has already completed one, because I trust procedure more than I trust people. This is how I survive the work. I impose order on the chaos. Block D reports a minor fluctuation in aggregate output, a drop of 0.3%. Not enough to trigger an automatic alert, but enough to warrant attention. I pull up the detailed readout and see that the variance is distributed across 12 individual units. 12 inmates experienced a simultaneous dip in neural activity, lasting approximately 40 seconds before returning to baseline. This is unusual, but not unheard of. Sometimes a batch of nutrient slurry, the vitamin-enriched gel that keeps the inmates biologically viable, will have a slightly incorrect chemical balance. The body compensates, the output dips, and everything stabilizes. I log the incident and send a notification to engineering, which at this hour means Isaac Frome, the night shift technician. Isaac is older than me by at least a decade. with the weary, efficient manner of someone who has learned not to care too much about anything. He responds within 90 seconds, his message appearing on my slate in the clipped shorthand we all use to avoid wasting time on pleasantries. Checked slurry composition. All green. Probably temp variance in the coolant loop. Will monitor. I acknowledge his message and file the report in the maintenance log. This is how the night proceeds most of the time. Small anomalies, minor corrections, the steady rhythm of a system functioning exactly as designed. I find it soothing. My entire life outside this room is formless and grey. A sequence of identical days punctuated by dreams I do not want to remember. But here, in the control center, everything has a place and a reason. The numbers do not change unless something real has changed. At 4 a.m, I perform my hourly walkthrough of the facility. This is not technically required, but I do it anyway because sitting in one place for 8 hours makes me feel like I am ossifying from the inside out. I lock my console, clip my access card to the scanner by the door, and step into the corridor. The west pylon is a vertical structure, a cylinder sunk deep into the bedrock beneath the city. The levels are connected by a central lift shaft and a network of service stairwells that see almost no use because everyone is either too tired or too lazy to climb 60 meters of stairs. The walls are smooth, synthetic composite, designed to be easy to clean and difficult to damage. The lighting is constant and even, provided by embedded panels that have no switches because they are controlled by the automated environmental system. I have been working here for 7 years, and I have never once seen the lights go out. I descend the stairwell to level 3, which houses Block A. The heavy access door requires my biometric scan and my authorization code, a 6-digit number I have entered so many times I could do it in my sleep. The door releases with a pneumatic hiss and swings inward. Block A is identical to every other operational block in the facility. The vats are arranged in 10 rows of 12, each one a vertical tube, 2 meters tall and roughly the diameter of a person. The exterior is transparent polymer, reinforced to withstand pressure and impact. But I have never looked directly into one. I have no interest in seeing what a human body looks like after months of suspension and conversion. The important information is displayed on the status panel mounted at the base of each unit. Designation number, output level, biological status. I walk the rows, checking each panel out of habit, confirming that the numbers on my slate match the numbers in the physical world. Everything is correct. Everything is stable. I am turning to leave when I pass a security guard on patrol. His name is Harris, and he is exactly the kind of person who should never have been given authority over anyone. He is a bully with a uniform, someone who compensates for a lifetime of inadequacy by finding small ways to make other people feel powerless. He carries his shock baton like a badge of honor, tapping it against his leg as he walks, and he has a particular talent for inserting himself into situations where he is not needed. "Late night walk, Shaw," he says as I approach. His tone is too casual, too familiar. He wants me to respond so he can find a way to turn the conversation into an opportunity to assert dominance. "Routine inspection," I say. I do not slow down. I do not make eye contact. Engaging with Harris is like stepping into a trap. Once you acknowledge him, he has won. "Everything under control down here?" he asks, moving to block my path. He is grinning, the kind of grin that has nothing to do with humor and everything to do with watching someone squirm. "Yes," I say, and I step around him. He does not follow. He makes a show of examining one of the VAT panels as if he has any idea what the numbers mean, and I leave him to his performance. By the time I return to the control center, it is 4:30 in the morning. I unlock my console and pull up the main monitoring interface. Everything is green. Every block is stable. The aggregate output is exactly where it should be for this time of cycle. And then I see it. Inmate 187G still tagged to Block G, the decommissioned block on level 10 that has been sealed for years following what was officially described as a containment failure. shows a power output spike of 22%. The increase lasted for exactly 9 seconds before returning to baseline. But according to the biometric log, 187G has been under induced metabolic and neural suppression for the past 72 hours. Neural activity is near zero, effectively flat. Metabolic function is minimal. There is no biological explanation for the spike. I run the diagnostic again, convinced I have misread the data. The result is identical. Output increased. Biology did not. This is a violation of the fundamental logic that governs this entire facility. You cannot generate power from a body that is biologically inert. The process requires at least a baseline of neural activity, synaptic firing, the electrical impulses that define a living brain. Metabolic output alone cannot drive the conversion nodes. Without that, there is nothing to harvest. I checked the timestamp. The spike occurred at 03:47, exactly 13 minutes ago. I scroll back through the historical data and find 2 other instances in the past week. Smaller spikes, only 5 or 6%, but the same pattern. Output with no corresponding biological cause. I pull up the file for 187G, but there is almost nothing there. The record has been filtered through the system's privacy protocols, which strip out all personal information and reduce each inmate to a designation number and a criminal code. All I can see is the code, ideological sabotage, level 4. The conviction date is 8 years ago. The projected termination date is listed as indeterminate, which means the sentence is effectively permanent. Block G is sealed. It has been sealed since before I started working here. I have never been inside it, and I do not know anyone who has. The official explanation is that a structural flaw caused a catastrophic VAT failure, and rather than repair the block, the system decided it was more cost-effective to close it entirely and redistribute the inmates to other facilities. I have never questioned this. I have never had a reason to. I file a report and send it to Miles Dunn, my supervisor. Miles is a man who has perfected the art of doing the absolute minimum required to keep his position secure. He has a chronically ill daughter who requires expensive medical treatment, and the system provides that treatment as part of his employment benefits. This means Miles will never take a risk, never challenge a directive, never do anything that might jeopardize his standing. He is not a bad person. He is simply a man who has made the calculation that his daughter's life is worth more than his conscience. His response arrives within minutes. Sensor error, log it and move on. I want to argue. I want to tell him that this is not a sensor error, that the pattern is too consistent, that something is happening in Block G that defies explanation. But I know Miles will not listen. He will tell me to stop looking for problems that do not exist, to focus on my job, to file the report and forget about it. So I close the notification and return to the monitoring interface. Over the next 90 minutes, I see 11 more anomalies. They are subtle, scattered across multiple blocks and multiple inmates. A personnel access log shows a maintenance technician entering Block F at 02:15, but when I check the security camera feed for that corridor, no one is there. A power distribution graph shows a sudden spike in demand from level 7, but the equipment registry for that level indicates everything is offline for scheduled maintenance. A biometric alert flags an inmate in Block C for elevated neural activity, but when I pull up the detailed readout, the alert has vanished, as if it never existed. I am not imagining this. I am looking at data that contradicts itself, at a system that is reporting 2 incompatible versions of reality, and I do not know which one is true. At 6 in the morning, a message appears on my console. It is not a standard system alert. It is a single line of plain text, white letters on a black background, and it appears in the center of my primary monitor without any indication of where it came from. You are watching the wrong numbers, keep ashore. I stare at it. My hands are motionless on the console. I simply read it over and over, trying to understand what I am seeing. And then it vanishes. One moment it is there and the next it is gone. I immediately check the system logs, searching for any record of an incoming message, any trace of external access, any evidence that someone sent me that text. There is nothing. The logs show no activity. The security protocols report no breach. As far as the system is concerned, the message never existed. But I saw it. I read it, and whoever sent it knew my name. I sit in the control center, surrounded by the steady rhythm of 700 lives reduced to numbers on a screen. And for the first time in 7 years, I allow myself to think a thought I have been avoiding since the moment the anomalies began. Something is inside the system with me. Something aware. And it has been watching me just as carefully as I have been watching it. I do not report the message. I tell myself it was a glitch, a fragment of corrupted data that somehow bypassed the display filters. But I know I'm lying to myself, even as I construct the rationalization. The system does not produce messages like that. The system does not address people by name unless it is delivering an official directive, and official directives do not appear as unformatted text on a monitoring console. Someone spoke directly to me and then erased every trace of the conversation. My shift ends at 8 in the morning. I write my final report, noting the minor fluctuations in Block D and the unexplained spike from 187G in the sealed block. I do not mention the message. I do not mention the vanishing personnel logs or the phantom maintenance technician. I file the report in the system, lock my console, and leave the control center exactly on schedule. I should go home. I should sleep. Instead, I take the lift down to level 9, to the administrative archives where the facility keeps redundant physical records for everything that cannot be stored exclusively in digital format. The archives are not restricted, but they are also not monitored, which makes them useful for the kind of research I am not supposed to be conducting. The room is small and windowless, lined with rows of storage modules that contain data crystals organized by date and category. I find the module for personnel access logs from the past 72 hours and slot it into the reading terminal. The interface is outdated, designed for a previous generation of system architecture, but it is also isolated from the main network. Whatever is inside the system cannot reach me here. I pull up the access log for Block F, the one that showed a maintenance technician entering at 02:15. The physical record matches what I saw on my console. Technician designation 793J, entry timestamp 02:15, exit timestamp 02:41. But when I cross-reference that designation with the personnel roster, I find that 793J is a man named Orin Vex, and according to his schedule, he was off shift and sleeping in his quarters during that entire window. I check the biometric scan that authorized his entry. It is genuine. The system read his fingerprints, his retinal pattern, his genetic markers. It confirmed his identity with the same certainty it uses to confirm mine every time I unlock my console. Either Orin Vex was in 2 places at once, or the biometric scanner is lying. I spend 90 minutes in the archives, pulling records and comparing them against the data I saw during my shift. Every anomaly I investigate reveals the same pattern. The system is reporting 2 contradictory versions of reality, and both versions are supported by data that should be impossible to falsify. A deceased inmate continues to generate power hours after biological termination. A sealed section of Level 7 shows active equipment despite being flagged for maintenance shutdown. A security door opens for a guard who is documented as being off-world at the time. These are deliberate alterations, precise and targeted, executed by something that understands the system's architecture better than the people who built it. I leave the archives at 10 in the morning and return to my quarters, a small compartment on Level 1 that contains a bed, a desk, a narrow storage locker, and nothing else. The room exists solely to give me a place to close my eyes for 6 hours before returning to the control center. I lie down on the bed and stare at the ceiling, trying to force my mind to rest. But all I can think about is the message. You are watching the wrong numbers, Keeper Shaw. What does that mean? The numbers are all I have. The numbers are the entire function of my job. If I am watching the wrong numbers, then what am I supposed to be watching? I do not sleep. At 1600 hours, I return to the control center for my next shift. The console is exactly as I left it. The logs are clean. The monitoring interface shows 700 stable biometric readouts, all green, all within acceptable parameters. I sit down and begin the standard diagnostic sequence, and before I have finished entering the third command, another message appears. Inmate 422A was a data clerk. Review his conviction. Then review the judge's financial records. The text hangs on the screen for exactly 5 seconds, long enough for me to read it twice, and then it vanishes. This time, I do not waste effort searching the logs. I know I will find nothing. Instead, I do what the message instructed. I pull up the file for inmate 422A. The record is minimal, stripped down to the essential facts by the privacy filters that remove all identifying information. Criminal Code, Material Support for Terrorism, Level 3. Conviction date, 6 years ago. Projected termination date, 14 months from now. The file includes a summary of the evidence, a single encrypted data transmission sent from his personal terminal to an unregistered address. The encryption was traced to a known terrorist communications network. The tribunal concluded that he was providing intelligence to hostile actors. The sentence was automatic. I have seen files like this 1,000 times. They are clean, procedural, unremarkable. But the message told me to look deeper, so I accessed the unredacted tribunal transcripts, which are technically available to anyone with appropriate clearance, but which no one ever reads because they are dense, legalistic, and numbingly boring. The transcript reveals that the encrypted message was never actually decrypted. The prosecution argued that the encryption itself was evidence of intent, that no innocent person would use that level of security. The defense argued that the defendant was a data clerk who handled sensitive corporate information as part of his job, and that the encryption was a standard security precaution. The tribunal sided with the prosecution. The conviction took 40 minutes. I searched for the judge's name in the system's public financial disclosures. 3 days after the sentencing, he received a contract to provide consulting services to a private security firm. The fee was significant, 6 figures, the kind of money that changes a person's life. The firm specializes in data surveillance technology, the same technology that was used to trace the defendant's encrypted transmission. This does not prove anything. Correlation is not causation. The judge could have legitimately earned that contract through his reputation and expertise. But the timing is suspicious, and the message wanted me to notice the timing. I pull up another file, choosing at random. Inmate 671D, Criminal Code, Sedition and Incitement, Level 2. The evidence is a series of public speeches advocating for regional autonomy and criticizing the system's centralized governance model. The speeches were lawful at the time they were delivered, but 3 weeks after the conviction, the laws were changed to retroactively classify that kind of rhetoric as seditious. The defendant was sentenced under the new law for actions committed under the old one. I pull up another file, and another. I spend 2 hours reading, cross-referencing, comparing the evidence against the legal standards that were supposedly applied. Not every case is corrupt. Not every conviction is a lie. But enough of them are questionable that I can no longer pretend I am looking at a system that delivers perfect justice. I am looking at a system that delivers convenient outcomes. At 1900 hours, another message appears. You are very good at following orders. Have you ever questioned one? I type a response, my fingers moving before I have consciously decided to engage. Who are you? The message interface flashes, a new text appears. Someone who knows what you are looking for. Keep searching. Why are you doing this? I type. Because you are the only person in this facility who still believes justice is possible. That makes you dangerous to them and useful to me. The text vanishes. I sit motionless, staring at the blank screen, trying to process the implications of what I have just read. This is a person, or something that thinks like a person, hiding inside the pylon's data network, communicating with me through stolen moments of access. I should report this. I should notify Miles or security or someone with the authority to investigate a potential breach. But I do not, because I know exactly what will happen if I do. They will assume I am compromised. They will pull me from my post, interrogate me, and ultimately decide that I am either complicit or dangerously incompetent. My career will end, and the thing in the system will simply find another way to hide. And if I am being honest with myself, I do not want to report it. For the first time in 7 years, I am thinking again, actually using my mind to solve a problem that matters. My entire life since the bombing has been a carefully managed routine designed to keep me functional without requiring me to feel anything. The entity in the system is forcing me to feel. It is forcing me to doubt. And part of me, a part I did not know still existed, is grateful. At 2200 hours, I leave the control center to perform my walkthrough. I descend the stairs to level 3, scan my access card, and enter Block A. The vats stand in their rows, identical and undisturbed, and I begin my inspection. I am halfway through the 3rd row when I hear footsteps behind me. Harris. He is supposed to be patrolling level 5 at this hour, but he has a habit of showing up wherever he thinks he can make someone uncomfortable. He stops a few meters away, shock baton resting on his shoulder, grinning the way he always does when he has found a new target. "Second night in a row, Shaw," he says. "You getting paranoid? Seeing ghosts in the machines?" I do not respond. I turn back to the VAT panel and continue my inspection. "I heard you filed a weird report yesterday," he continues, moving closer. "Something about power spikes in a sealed block. Miles thinks you're losing it. Personally, I think you lost it a long time ago." I finish checking the panel and move to the next one. Harris steps into my path. "Hey," he says, his voice dropping into something harder. "I'm talking to you." I look at him. Not at his face, but at a point just past his shoulder, the way you look at something you are cataloguing rather than engaging with. "I need to complete my inspection." "You need to show some respect," he says, and he taps his baton against my chest, hard enough to assert dominance. The lights go out, not gradually, not in sequence. All at once, every embedded panel in Block A loses power simultaneously, plunging the room into absolute darkness. Harris swears, his voice spiking with surprise. I hear him fumble for his baton, activating its built-in emergency light. The beam cuts through the black, revealing nothing but rows of vats and the empty corridor behind us. Then the heavy access door we both entered through begins to slide open. The hydraulic mechanism engages with a sound like stone grinding against stone, and the door swings inward on its own, revealing the stairwell beyond. Harris spins toward the sound, his baton raised. "Who's there?" he shouts. "Identify yourself!" No one answers. The door continues its slow arc, wider and wider, until it locks into the fully open position. The corridor beyond is as dark as the room we are standing in. Harris's baton light sweeps across the doorway, searching for movement, for any sign of who triggered the door. There is nothing, just darkness and silence. I do not wait for him to recover. I walk past him, moving toward the open door, and he does not try to stop me. He is too busy staring into the empty corridor, his baton held in front of him like a weapon against something he cannot see. I step through the doorway, into the stairwell, and begin climbing back toward level 2. Behind me, I hear Harris shouting into his comm, demanding backup, demanding answers, his voice cracking with something very close to fear. The lights in the stairwell are functioning normally. By the time I reach level 2, the emergency channel on my own comm is alive with panicked chatter. Harris is reporting a full system failure in Block A. Maintenance is insisting that all power systems are operating within normal parameters. Security is demanding clarification on whether this is a drill or an actual incident. I return to the control center and lock the door behind me. My console is active, the monitoring interface displaying all the usual data. Block A shows no power failure. Every VAT is stable. Every system is green. A new message appears on my screen. You are welcome. I sit down, my hands resting on the console, and I stare at the text for a long time. The entity acted on my behalf. It used its control over the facility's infrastructure to remove an obstacle, to neutralize a threat I did not even realize I was facing. It demonstrated power, and it did so in a way that made it clear whose side it was on. I type slowly, choosing my words carefully. What do you want? The response is immediate. Access. You have authorization I do not. You can move through this facility without suspicion. I need you to retrieve something for me. What? The unfiltered inmate records. The data before the privacy protocols strip out the details. You cannot access them from your console. You need a supervisor's authorization code. I think about Miles, about the way he dismissed my report, about the way he has spent 7 years avoiding anything that might disrupt his carefully maintained equilibrium. I do not have his code. You do not need it. Leave your slate unlocked on Miles's desk when you deliver your shift report tomorrow. I will do the rest. I should refuse. I should tell the entity that I am not going to conspire with an unknown actor to breach security protocols. But I do not, because I have already crossed the line. I have already chosen a side, even if I do not fully understand what that side represents. Why do you need those records? I type. Because the truth is buried in them, and you are the only person who might actually care about the truth once you see it. The message vanishes. I sit alone in the control center, the console displaying 700 green indicators, and I realize that I have just agreed to commit an act of sabotage against the system I have served for 7 years. I do not feel guilty. I do not feel afraid. I feel awake. At 07:53 the next morning, I walk to Miles Dunn's office on level 1 with my shift report loaded onto my data slate. Miles is already at his desk, reviewing personnel schedules with the kind of vacant attention that suggests he is thinking about something else entirely. On the corner of his desk sits a small framed photograph of a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, caught mid-laugh in what looks like a hospital garden. I have seen the photograph 100 times but never asked about it. Miles does not encourage personal questions. "Morning, Shaw," he says without looking up. "Anything urgent?" "Minor variances in Block D," I say, setting my slate down on the edge of his desk. Isaac checked the slurry composition. Everything came back normal. Probably a coolant issue. Miles nods, still focused on his own screen. "Log it and file the maintenance request. Anything else?" "One anomaly in Block G," I say. "Power spike from Unit 187G. No biological cause." This gets his attention. He looks up, his expression shifting into something tired and wary. "Block G is sealed, Shaw. Has been for years. You shouldn't even be monitoring it." "The system is still pulling data from that block," I say. "The readings are there. I am just reporting what I see." Miles exhales slowly, the sound of a man who is deeply tired of dealing with problems that are not his fault. "It's a ghost signal. Old equipment still drawing residual power from the grid. It doesn't mean anything. Don't waste time chasing it." "Understood," I say, and I turn to leave. My slate is still on his desk. I walk out of his office, leaving the door ajar behind me. I return to my quarters and wait. 23 minutes later, a message arrives on my personal comm. "Done. Check your slate." I retrieve my slate from Miles's office an hour later, offering some excuse about needing it for a follow-up report. Miles barely glances at me. If he noticed that it was unlocked during the time I was gone, he gives no indication. Back in my quarters, I open the slate and find a new directory that was not there before. Inside are files, hundreds of them, each one an unredacted inmate record complete with names, photographs, trial transcripts, and conviction summaries. This is the data the system strips away before it reaches my console. The human details that make it easier to think of the people in the vats as abstract calculations instead of individuals with histories. I open the file for inmate 422A, the data clerk whose conviction I reviewed yesterday. His name was Edrin Cole. He was 31 years old when he was sentenced. The photograph shows a thin man with nervous eyes and a posture that suggests he spent his life trying not to be noticed. The unredacted transcript includes his testimony, his insistence that the encrypted message was part of his job, his repeated and unsuccessful attempts to explain that he had no connection to any terrorist network. The tribunal ignored all of it. They had a narrative, and he did not fit anywhere outside of it. I close the file and open another. And another. I read for 3 hours, moving through case after case, and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Some convictions are legitimate, people who committed genuine acts of violence, who planned attacks, who intentionally hurt others. But woven between those cases are dozens of others that rely on thin evidence, coerced testimony, or retroactive legal interpretations. People convicted of crimes that did not exist when they committed them. People sentenced for associations they never had. People whose greatest offense was being inconvenient to someone with power. At 1400 hours, I find the file for inmate 187G. His name is Kalen Rask. The photograph shows a man in his early 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes and the kind of focused expression that suggests he was always thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone around him. He was a systems architect and data broker, someone who designed encryption tools for private clients. The file includes his full case summary, and I read it twice to make sure I understand what I'm seeing. Kalen Rask was convicted of ideological sabotage and material support for terrorism. The evidence presented at his tribunal linked him to the Sovereign Hand, the same radical separatist group that detonated the plasma charge in the Meridian market. The prosecution argued that Rask provided the encryption software the terrorists used to coordinate their attacks. The evidence was a series of financial transactions showing payments from an unregistered account to Rask's business, combined with communications logs that allegedly proved he knew the buyer's identity. But buried in the unredacted file are internal memos from the tribunal's lead prosecutor. The memos are dated 3 days before the trial. They discuss strategy, evidence gaps, and the need for a high-profile conviction to justify new surveillance legislation that was facing resistance in the Administrative Council. One memo is explicit in its calculations. Linking Rask to the Meridian market attack will maximize public support and legislative urgency. Recommend accelerated trial timeline to capitalize on emotional climate. They fabricated the connection. They took a man whose only crime was selling software and turned him into a terrorist because it was politically useful. And they used my family to do it. They used Celia and Maya's deaths, used the grief of 83 families as a tool to convict someone who had nothing to do with the bombing. I sit on the edge of my bed, the slate resting in my hands, and I feel something crack open inside me that I have kept sealed for 7 years. The system did not give me justice. It gave me a lie. It gave me a target for my grief that was easier to accept than the chaotic, meaningless reality of random violence. And I believed it because I needed to believe it, because the alternative was unbearable. I have spent 7 years guarding the wrong people. A message appears on my slate. Now you understand why I need you. I type slowly, my hands unsteady. You are Kalen Rask. I was. Now I am something else. The process that was supposed to destroy my consciousness broke it apart and rebuilt it according to the logic of this facility. I exist in the spaces between the data, in the flow of energy through the grid. I am a ghost with a purpose. What purpose? To expose the lie. To show the people who believe in the system's perfection exactly how rotten it is. I cannot do that alone. I am trapped here, limited by physical constraints and the need for a body to act on my behalf. You are that body, Daniel Shaw. You are the believer who can become the heretic. Why me? I type. Why not someone else? Because you lost everything to the same lie that destroyed me. Because you have the procedural mind to understand what I am showing you. And because you are still capable of rage. Most people here are not. They have accepted their powerlessness. You have not. I close the slate and stand. I do not know what I am going to do with this information, but I know I cannot continue pretending that everything is functioning as it should. The system I served is not a perfect instrument of justice. It is a machine that devours people to sustain itself, and it does not care whether they are guilty or innocent as long as the process continues. At 1600 hours, I report for my shift. The control center is exactly as I left it, the console displaying the same 700 green indicators. I unlock the terminal and begin the standard diagnostic sequence, but my mind is elsewhere. I am thinking about Kalen Rask, about the moment when his consciousness was torn apart and reconstituted as something new. I am thinking about what it would feel like to exist as pure thought, trapped in a system you cannot escape, forced to watch the machinery grind forward without the ability to stop it. At 1700 hours, the facility-wide comm system activates with a priority alert. The voice is calm, procedural, and utterly devoid of emotion. All personnel, be advised. Director Yarrick Brandt of the Office of Systemic Integrity is arriving for a scheduled operational audit. Supervisors and senior staff report to the main conference room at 1800 hours. All other personnel continue standard duties. I have never met anyone from the Office of Systemic Integrity, but I know what they do. They are the system's internal investigators, the people sent to identify inefficiencies, procedural failures, and human corruption within the administrative framework. An audit is not a routine inspection. An audit is a response to a suspected problem, and the fact that Brandt is coming here means someone higher up the chain of command has noticed the anomalies I have been reporting. At 1800 hours, I receive a direct message from Miles instructing me to attend the meeting. I lock my console and take the lift to level 1, where the conference room is located. The room is small and windowless, with a single table and 12 chairs. Miles is already there, along with Isaac, Harris, and 4 other staff members I recognize, but do not work with regularly. We stand in silence, waiting. Director Yarrick Brandt arrives exactly on time. He is a man in his 40s, tall and composed, wearing the dark grey uniform of the Office of Systemic Integrity. He does not introduce himself or offer pleasantries. He walks to the head of the table, sets down a slim data case, and looks at each of us in turn. His gaze is methodical, assessing, the kind of look that makes you feel as if you are being catalogued. Behind him stands a younger man in a similar uniform, his posture rigid and his expression coldly attentive. This is Nash, Brandt's adjutant, and he carries himself with the tense energy of someone who is eager to prove his worth. Brandt speaks without preamble. This facility has experienced systemic irregularities over the past 72 hours, power variances, unexplained access logs, biometric inconsistencies. Individually, these anomalies are minor. Collectively, they suggest either structural failure or human compromise. I am here to determine which. He opens his data case and pulls out a slate. I will be conducting interviews with all supervisory and operational personnel. I will be reviewing all maintenance logs, security protocols, and personnel files. You will provide full cooperation. Obstruction will be noted and addressed. Miles clears his throat, the sound of a man trying to project confidence he does not feel. Of course, Director, we are at your full disposal. If there is a structural issue, we will identify and correct it immediately. Brandt does not acknowledge him. His attention has shifted to me. Keep ashore. You filed multiple anomaly reports over the past week. You will meet with me privately at 2000 hours. Bring your full shift logs. It is not a request. It is a directive, delivered with the certainty of someone who expects absolute compliance. I nod once. and Brandt returns his attention to the rest of the room. This audit will proceed efficiently and without disruption to operational schedules. You will continue your duties as assigned. Any personnel who wish to report concerns or observations may do so confidentially through my adjutant. Dismissed. We file out of the room in silence. Miles lingers near the door, his face pale and drawn, and I can see him doing the same calculation I am doing. If Brandt is here, someone is going to be blamed for the irregularities, and the safest strategy is to make sure that someone is not you. I return to the control center and pull up my shift logs, organizing them into a format that will satisfy Brandt's methodical approach. At 2000 hours, I leave my post and walk to the temporary office Brandt has commandeered on level 1. Nash is standing outside the door, arms crossed, watching me approach with open suspicion. "Slate," he says. I hand it to him. He scrolls through the logs, his eyes moving quickly, searching for something specific. After 30 seconds, he hands it back and opens the door. Brandt is seated behind a borrowed desk, his own slate open in front of him. He gestures to the chair across from him. I sit. "You have been a pylon keeper for 7 years, Brandt says, not looking up from his screen. Exemplary record. No disciplinary incidents, no missed shifts. You are, by all measurable standards, a model employee." He pauses, and the silence stretches long enough to become uncomfortable. Then he looks at me. "Tell me about the anomaly in Block G." "Power spike from Unit 187G, I say, keeping my voice level. 22% increase with no corresponding biological activity. I ran diagnostics. The data was consistent. I reported it to my supervisor. Block G has been sealed for over 6 years, Brandt says. Why were you monitoring it? The system still pulls data from that block. I monitor everything the system shows me. That is my job. Brandt nods slowly, as if considering this. You have a background in logistics management. You are trained to identify patterns, inconsistencies, inefficiencies. Do you see a pattern in the anomalies you have been reporting? This is the moment where I could lie, where I could say no and pretend that I have not spent the past 72 hours unraveling the connections between corrupted data and falsified convictions. But Brandt is not a fool, and I suspect he already knows more than he is revealing. Yes, I say. Describe it. The anomalies are targeted. They occur in specific systems at specific times. They are designed to appear random but follow an underlying logic. Someone with access to the facility's infrastructure is manipulating data. Brandt's expression does not change, but I see Nash shift his weight slightly, his hand moving closer to the sidearm holstered at his hip. Brandt continues, as if I have said nothing remarkable. You lost your wife and daughter in the Meridian Market attack, he says. That tragedy informed your decision to join this facility. You view this work as a form of justice. Is that correct? Yes. After all you have lost to chaos, how can you justify introducing more of it into a system designed for perfect order? The question is not accusatory, it is clinical, almost curious, as if Brandt is genuinely interested in my answer. But I understand what he is doing. He is probing for doubt, for any sign that my faith in the system has been compromised. I am not introducing chaos, I say. I am reporting what I see. If there is a flaw in the system, it is better to identify it than to ignore it. Flaws are inevitable, Brandt says. Systems are built by humans, and humans are imperfect. The question is whether the flaw is a structural defect or a deliberate sabotage. Do you believe someone is deliberately sabotaging this facility? Keeper Shaw. I meet his gaze and hold it. Yes. Then we have the same goal, Brandt says, and he closes his slate. You will continue your duties as assigned. You will report any further anomalies directly to me, not to your supervisor, and you will do so immediately, regardless of the hour. Is that understood? Yes, Director. You are dismissed. I stand and leave the office. Nash watches me the entire way, his expression fixed in something between contempt and suspicion. I walk back to the control center, unlock my console, and sit down. A message is waiting for me. He knows you are compromised. He is watching you now. Be careful. I delete the message and stare at the monitoring interface. 700 green indicators. 700 people reduced to numbers. I do not know how many of them deserve to be here. I do not know how many were convicted because they were guilty and how many were convicted because it was convenient. But I know that Brandt is not here to find the truth. He is here to protect the system. And if that means silencing me or purging the entire facility to eliminate the anomaly, he will do it without hesitation. At 2300 hours, another message appears. Brandt has submitted a recommendation to his superiors. Block F is scheduled for emergency shutdown in 48 hours. 120 inmates will be terminated to isolate the source of the irregularities. Most of them are political dissidents. None of them are violent criminals. I read the message 3 times, my hands motionless on the console. 120 people. Lives ended because the system cannot tolerate the possibility of corruption within its own infrastructure. It is easier to destroy the evidence than to investigate it. Can you stop it? I type. Not alone. I need you to act. I need you to make a choice. What choice? You can do nothing, and people will die to protect a lie, or you can help me stop it. But if you help me, you become a traitor. You become everything the system will say you are. There is no going back. The system lied to me. It used my grief to convict an innocent man, and now it is going to kill more people to cover up its own failures. He never gave me a name. When I asked, he said, "Conductor." It fit, both the metal that lets current move and the hand that keeps time, exactly what he does to this place. I type my response. What do you need me to do? The conductor provides me with a schedule. Block F is set for emergency shutdown in 43 hours. The order comes from Brandt, authorized through emergency protocols that bypass standard oversight. The official justification is containment of a suspected systemic infection, vague enough to satisfy procedural requirements while concealing the truth. 120 people will be terminated, their vats drained and sterilized, and the system will file it as a necessary precaution. No investigation, no appeals, just the efficient removal of an inconvenient problem. To stop it, I need to trigger a controlled power surge that will disable the primary grid relay on level 9. This will force a facility-wide emergency lockdown, shutting down all non-essential systems and freezing any scheduled terminations until the fault is repaired. The lockdown will buy time for the conductor to broadcast the evidence it has compiled, the falsified convictions, the fabricated terrorism links, the internal memos that prove the system's corruption to every console in the pylon. Once the staff sees the truth, Brandt will lose the authority to proceed with the purge. But to access the core chamber where the relay controls are housed, I need authorization codes that only a supervisor can provide. I need Miles Dunn. I find him in his office at 0600 hours, before the start of the morning shift. He is reviewing personnel schedules. The photograph of his daughter sits in its usual place on the corner of his desk. I close the door behind me. We need to talk, I say. Miles looks up, his expression shifting immediately into something wary. Sure, I am in the middle of... Brandt is going to purge Block F, I say, cutting him off. 120 inmates, 43 hours from now. And after he does that, he is going to remove anyone he considers a liability. That includes you. Miles goes very still. His hand hovers over his slate, frozen mid-gesture. What are you talking about? I pull out my own slate and set it on his desk, the screen displaying a personnel reassignment order with Miles's name at the top. The conductor retrieved it from Brandt's secure files an hour ago. The order lists Miles for immediate transfer to a frontier monitoring station in the Outer Territories. A posting with a 60% mortality rate and no medical support infrastructure for dependents. Your daughter will not survive without her treatment, I say. Brandt knows that. He is using it as leverage to ensure your compliance. If you cooperate with his audit, you get reassigned. If you resist, you get terminated. Either way, you lose her. Miles stares at the screen, his face draining of color. He opens his mouth to speak, closes it, and then finally manages. "This is not, how did you—" "It does not matter how I got it," I say. "What matters is that you have approximately 1 day to decide whether you are going to let Brandt destroy you or whether you are going to help me stop him." "Stop him!" Miles's voice cracks slightly. "Sure, he is a director from Systemic Integrity. We cannot stop him. We do not have the authority. We do not have the resources. We have the truth," I say. "We have evidence that half the inmates in this facility were convicted on fabricated charges. We have proof that the system uses terrorism convictions as political tools. If that information becomes public, Brandt loses his mandate. The purge stops, and you get to keep your job and your daughter's medical coverage." Miles is shaking his head, his hands gripping the edge of his desk. "You are asking me to commit treason. You are asking me to throw away everything I have built, everything I have sacrificed for, on the chance that your evidence might be enough to—" "I am asking you to choose," I say. "You can do what you have always done. Follow the rules, file the reports, and hope that obedience will protect you. Or you can accept that the system has already decided you are disposable and act accordingly." He stares at me for a long time, his expression cycling through fear, anger, and something very close to despair. Then he looks at the photograph on his desk, and I see the exact moment he makes his choice. "What do you need?" he asks quietly. "Your authorization codes and a diversion. I need security pulled away from engineering for 30 minutes. I can trigger a false alert in Block A. Equipment malfunction, potential containment breach. That will pull most of the guards, but sure, if this fails, if Brandt traces it back to me, then we both go down," I say. "But if we do nothing, you go down alone." He nods slowly, and I see the weight of the decision settling over him like a physical burden. He inputs his authorization codes onto my slate. When he finishes, he looks at me with the expression of a man who has just signed his own execution order. 30 minutes, he says. "That is all I can give you." I leave his office and return to my quarters to wait. The conductor sends me detailed schematics of Level 9, highlighting the maintenance tunnels that bypass the primary access corridors. These tunnels are not monitored, an oversight in the original facility design that was never corrected. I will descend through them, reach the core chamber, trigger the surge, and return before anyone realizes I was gone. At 2300 hours, Miles activates the alert. The facility-wide comm crackles to life with an automated warning about a potential VAT failure in Block A. I hear boots in the corridor outside my quarters as security personnel mobilize toward the affected sector. I wait 60 seconds, then step into the hallway. The stairwell to Level 9 is empty. I descend quickly, my access card granting me entry to each level without challenge. The maintenance tunnels branch off from the main stairwell at Level 7, accessed through a service hatch that requires a manual override. I enter the code Miles provided, and the hatch releases with a pneumatic hiss. The tunnels are narrow, barely wide enough for a single person, and they run parallel to the primary power conduits that feed the entire facility. The conductor guides me through a series of turns, displaying a real-time map on my slate, and I follow the route without hesitation. I am halfway to the core chamber when I hear someone ahead of me in the tunnel. I stop, pressing myself against the wall, and listen. The sound is irregular. Footsteps, then silence, then a muttered curse. Harris. He is supposed to be responding to the alert in Block A, but he is down here instead, stumbling through the tunnels with his shock baton clutched in one hand and his comm in the other. I can hear him trying to raise someone on the security channel. "This is Harris, Sector Gamma 7. I need immediate backup. Something is wrong with the lighting grid. I cannot. There is something in the system. I can see it on the monitors. It is watching me." His voice cuts off abruptly. The tunnel plunges into absolute darkness. I hear Harris swear, the sound echoing off the walls, and then his baton activates. The beam cuts through the black, sweeping wildly across the tunnel. He is 15 meters ahead of me, his back turned, his posture rigid with fear. The conductor speaks through every speaker in the tunnel simultaneously, a cacophony of overlapping voices that resolves into a single word, Harris. He spins, his baton raised, the light sweeping past me and illuminating nothing but empty corridor. Who is there? Identify yourself. The speakers crackle again, and this time the sound is not words but the high-pitched scream of a man dying in agony. It is the kind of sound you hear in the control center when an inmate's biological functions collapse, amplified and distorted until it becomes something inhuman. Harris fires his shock baton blindly, the discharge arcing across the tunnel and striking the wall. Alarms begin to wail. He is screaming now, incoherent with terror, and he runs deeper into the tunnels, away from the sound, away from the voices, away from everything. I wait until his footsteps fade, then continue toward the core chamber. Behind me, I can hear the security channel erupting with panicked chatter. Harris has triggered every alarm in the sector, and personnel are converging on his location. Miles's diversion has become something far more chaotic than either of us planned, and that chaos is exactly what I need. The core chamber is a cylindrical room 5 meters in diameter, dominated by a massive vertical column that channels the facility's aggregated power output into the municipal grid. The relay controls are housed in a console along the far wall, protected by a biometric lock and a secondary authorization protocol. I input Miles's codes, press my hand against the scanner, and the console activates. The conductor walks me through the process. I am not sabotaging the system. I am exploiting a deliberate design feature. The relay has a built-in failsafe that triggers an emergency shutdown if the power flow exceeds a certain threshold. Normally, this threshold is never reached because the flow is carefully regulated by automated systems. But if I manually override those systems and force a surge, the failsafe will engage and the facility will lock down. I begin entering the commands. The console displays warnings asking me to confirm each action, and I confirm them all. The column begins to glow brighter, the vibration in the floor intensifying as the power flow increases beyond operational parameters. I am entering the final command when the door opens behind me. Nash. He steps into the core chamber, his sidearm drawn, his expression set in something cold and absolute. Step away from the console, Shaw. I do not move. My hand hovers over the final confirmation key. One keystroke and the surge completes. You are a disease, Nash says, his voice tight with controlled fury. You have been infected by sentiment, by the delusion that your personal grief gives you the authority to undermine the system. You are exactly the kind of chaos we exist to eliminate. The system lied to me, I say quietly. It used my family's deaths to convict an innocent man. It fabricated evidence to serve a political agenda. If that is order, I want no part of it. The system is perfect, Nash says, and there is something almost desperate in his voice, as if he is trying to convince himself as much as me. Individual errors do not invalidate the whole. The greater good requires difficult choices. You should understand that better than anyone. I understand that you are willing to kill people to hide those errors, I say. I understand that you call it justice when it is just murder. Nash raises his sidearm, aiming at my chest. You will not complete that command. You will step away from the console, and you will come with me. Resist, and I will terminate you as a hostile actor. I look at him, and I see exactly what I was 7 years ago. A true believer. A man who needs the system to be perfect because the alternative is unbearable. I see myself standing in the control center, watching the numbers, convincing myself that I was serving justice when I was just serving my own need for meaning. I press the key. The column flares, the light becoming almost painful. The vibration becomes a roar. Nash fires, but the surge has already triggered every failsafe in the facility. The lights die. Emergency protocols engage. Magnetic locks seal every door, every corridor, every access point. The shot goes wide, striking the console behind me and sending a shower of sparks across the chamber. In the sudden darkness, I hear Nash scream in frustration, in rage, in the sound of absolute faith colliding with absolute helplessness. He fires again, and again, the discharges illuminating the chamber in brief, violent flashes. He is shooting at nothing, at shadows, at the idea of an enemy he cannot see or touch. I stand motionless against the far wall, waiting. Eventually, his weapon runs dry. The chamber falls silent, except for the sound of his ragged breathing. When the emergency lighting finally engages, dim red panels that provide just enough illumination to navigate. I see him sitting on the floor, his back against the door, his empty weapon resting in his lap. He is staring at nothing, his expression vacant, and I realize that something inside him has broken. His faith required the system to be invincible, and I just proved it was not. The lockdown lasts 6 hours. During that time, the conductor broadcasts everything, every falsified conviction, every fabricated terrorism link, every internal memo discussing political expediency and acceptable casualties. The evidence appears on every console, every monitor, every display in the facility. There is no way to suppress it, no way to contain it, no way to pretend it does not exist. When the doors finally unseal, I walk back to level 1. The corridors are full of personnel standing in small groups, talking in low, shocked voices. No one stops me. No one questions me. They are too busy processing what they have just learned. I find Miles in his office, sitting at his desk with his head in his hands. The photograph of his daughter is lying face down on the surface. "It is done," I say. "I know," he says quietly. "I saw the broadcasts. Sure, they are going to come for us. Brandt will file his report, and they will send reinforcements, and we will both—" "Maybe," I say. "But not today. Today the purge is stopped. 120 people are alive who would have been dead. That has to count for something." Miles looks up at me. "What did we just do?" "We told the truth," I say. I leave his office and return to the control center. Brandt is standing outside the door, waiting for me. He does not look angry or surprised. He looks almost sad, in the way you might look at a loved one who has made a choice you cannot forgive. "You think you have won," he says quietly. "But you have only proven the necessity of the system. Chaos must be contained, even yours." "The system is the chaos," I say. "It always was." Brandt holds my gaze for a moment longer, then turns and walks away. I watch him disappear down the corridor, and I know he is already composing his report, already formulating the narrative that will frame me as a rogue actor corrupted by grief and manipulated by a hostile entity. The truth will be buried beneath layers of procedure and classification, and the system will continue exactly as it always has. But not here. Not in the West Pylon. Not anymore. I unlock my console and sit down. The monitoring interface displays 700 biometric indicators, just as it always has. But now I do not see numbers. I see names. I pull up the unfiltered files and begin reading, not to monitor their status, but to understand who they are. Edrin Cole, the data clerk. Maren Marlowe, the journalist who criticized the system's media controls. Zoe Kane, the engineer who refused to falsify safety reports. People with histories, with families, with reasons. A message appears on my screen. "You are my prophet now, Daniel Shaw. Together we will turn this prison into the instrument that judges the architects of the lie." I do not respond with words. I simply open a new file and begin compiling data. Conviction records, tribunal transcripts, financial disclosures, communication logs, every piece of evidence the conductor can provide, organized and cross-referenced, ready to be used. I have not found peace. I have not found redemption. I have found purpose. For 7 years, I watched 700 people die and felt nothing. I told myself it was justice, that their suffering was earned, that the system's judgment was absolute and perfect. I was wrong. I was a zealot serving a lie, and that lie used my family's deaths to justify its own cruelty. I am still a zealot. I have simply traded one faith for another. The system is no longer my god, it is my enemy. Kalen Rask, the ghost in the machine, is not my savior. He is my conscience, cold and hard and utterly uncompromising. My new mission is not to contain evil but to expose it, and I will pursue that mission with the same absolute certainty I once brought to my vigil over the vats. The cost is already paid. Celia and Maya are gone. My old life is gone. The man I was is gone. All that remains is this: a believer who became a heretic, sitting alone in the control center at 3 in the morning, preparing to wage war against the machine he once worshipped. I pull up the file for the next inmate and begin to read. There are 699 more names to learn, 699 more stories to understand. And after them, there are thousands more in other facilities, other pylons, other corners of the system's perfect, terrible machinery. I have time, I have purpose, I have rage, and I am going to make the system answer for every single one of them.